You know, one of these days I'm going to remember to unmute my mic. One of these days I'm going to remember to do that eventually. But anyways, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to the Cutline. I'm your host, Armani DePaul, and you're probably wondering, what I was saying for, the last minute. I'll basically talk about how it felt good to see my driver, because I'm a Larson fan. Obviously, we got the Kyle Larson Indy 500, Coke 600 double. So, I was basically talking about how it felt good to see my driver actually have a shot at winning a Superspeedway for the first time since the 2017 Daytona 500. And, if NASCAR wasn't NASCAR and we actually were allowed to race back to the green and have basically the same finish that we did last year, I think Larson would have gotten it done. He had the momentum coming out of turn 3 and 4. I think he would have gotten the win. But that move that Hocevar did was so nice. I mean, if he got the win off of that, he would have deserved it, no doubt. But we got a lot to talk about here for the Cutline. Before we get started, let me know what you guys think about this race, this weekend's races as a whole. And you'll get my thoughts once we get onto the race weekend rankings. And we'll actually bring something new to our edition of Race Weekend Rankings. But before we go, let's go into the chat real quick and see what we got here. Yeah, I'm well aware that I was muted. You know what's funny? The first episode, it was because for some reason OBS wasn't linked to my mic. It was linked to something else, and that's why I was muted, so I had to fix that. And then this episode, it's because my mic wasn't even on. As soon as I looked down and I saw that the lights weren't on, just like this. As soon as I saw the lights weren't on, I'm like, yep, that sounds about right. But let's see what else we got here. I hate this show. Thank you, OJ. Much appreciated. Why couldn't you win a Loudon? And Bryce Lamb, where did the other guy go? The guy that used to host this. If you're talking about, I believe it was John. I'm not sure where I'm not sure. I can just tell you, I'm Armani, and this is the Cutline. So, welcome. Hopefully stick around, and yeah, we'll have a good time. Let's see. So, you know what? Let's just jump straight into it and talk about what I have this weekend above the cut line and below the cut line. But before we get started, so if any of you have been around for, any episodes in the past, you know that I always bring on a guest. We had NASCAR opinion on for the first one, and then we had Vanilla Wafers on for the second episode. For this episode, we're completing the championship 4, if you will, because that's our group chat name. And we're bringing on a very special friend. I saw him at Daytona. If you guys were at the Daytona tent last week, first of all, thank you for coming to the tent. And second of all, maybe you've seen this guy around. You probably didn't know who he was just off face value. But one of the rising stars in NASCAR YouTube. And especially in a certain niche of NASCAR YouTube. And that is NASCAR betting. There's not a lot of it out there. We got Dirty Mo or Dirty Mo Doe. I think that's the Steve Letarte podcast name. A bunch of other stuff. But this guy, he has been on it for a while now, and he's interviewed a bunch of great guys in the industry. So before we really get started, let's bring on my good friend, Johnny, a.k.a. Johnny on the track. Johnny, what's up, man?
Armani, what's going on? Bryce, look, you're stuck with us. You are stuck with us, Bryce. I'm going right to the chat early. Yeah, man, that was something else, that finish there. I see somebody else talking about Hocevar. That kid is a problem on the racetrack. And I saw Blaney, Chastain. Heck, I might call in to find that guy's phone number to talk to him. He is something else out there. He's a menace on 4 wheels. But man, it was entertaining. So I'm ready to talk Atlanta and whatever else we got on the agenda, my friend.
Absolutely, and I'm already seeing here in the chat, we got JGR for life. If I was NASCAR, I would release the rulebook to the public. I believe isn't it already released to the public? But, we kind of got a hint of this because I don't know if you know this, but they actually did announce that NASCAR said in the drivers' meeting that they were going to throw the yellow on the last lap if it was warranted. But, I mean, why do that? I mean, here's the thing. Would I prefer they throw it under the yellow for safety purposes? Yes, because you want to keep everyone safe. However, you've already let Daytona under green. You've already let the Truck and Xfinity race under green. And yeah, this race, when we were going to have another 3-wide finish, you throw the yellow. It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it makes absolutely no sense at all. It they put themselves in a tough spot. Well, first of all, I mean, it's the inconsistency. They have no clue what they're doing at all, like throwing that flag ever, it seems like. But, you know, it'd be one thing if, like, Bell was just out front on his own, like, you know, 3, 4 car lengths in front of everybody, and you throw the caution. They're literally 3 wide. Hocevar, again, a menace on 4 wheels, makes this like awesome move to get 3 wide to go to the middle. Like that was sick. Like I can't stand watching the guy because he's gonna wreck every one of our drivers. But that move was terrific. So they're 3 wide, and there's a wreck like 6, 7 rows back, and they throw the caution flag. And you know it didn't really seem like anybody. Like I saw Barry hit the wall. It wasn't like a crazy hit. So I just was kind of like, it's so frustrating, man, because I think we were in for another great finish with 3 guys that all deserved it, from Bell and the Larson rivalry up front, and then this young gun who, you know, just cannot be stopped making his way to the front. The kid's fast, but man, is he something. He's just crazy watching. So you had 3 like just big names up there at this point. And they throw the caution flag, and Bell, you know, just got lucky. That's all it was. There wasn't much skill involved, like of him leading at that point. He probably would have got toasted by Larson there. He didn't even have the run at all. It was Larson that had the run. So I don't know. I love Bell. I'm not complaining. But you know, I had money on Hendrick to win, so I wanted Larson to win.
Absolutely. We'll get to that later on. Well, I guess you could say that is below the cut line, but we'll get to that when we talk about below the cut line. But let's jump straight into it. Now we're going to do things a little bit different here. You'll see as we go on here. But let's start off with above the cut line. And before we get started, I do have to count this as above the cut line. My driver won the stage. My driver won stage number 2. Of course, Kyle Larson. His best shot at winning at a Superspeedway probably in his entire career. I mentioned before, we go back to the 2017 Daytona 500. This isn't really a true above the cut line, but as a Larson fan, I did want to bring that out there. But let's get to the real above the cut line. The first one that I want to talk about, and that is for all of you gamers out there. I know my boy Josh, you know, shout out to Josh. He's in the helped with the Downforce as well. Great guy. He's a big gamer. And I even asked him in our chat, you know, in the newsroom, would you consider what iRacing revealed above or below the cut line? I knew he was going to say above the cut line. But, so, take a look at the screen right here. iRacing reveals new details for the 2025 career mode. And so, if any of you watched the dev diary, they basically laid out the career mode in pretty big detail, as a matter of fact. Oh, so fix this here. There we go. So basically what iRacing did is they detailed their career mode, and it mentioned a lot of good things. Specifically how in depth it seems like career mode is going to be for NASCAR 25. You know, we haven't had a good NASCAR game really in a long time. You know, you could say, I personally think NASCAR Heat 4 was a solid NASCAR game, which you could say solid and good. Would you put them together? Maybe, maybe not, down the middle. NASCAR Heat 5 was basically a reskin, and then NASCAR 21 Ignition was one of the worst NASCAR games in history. I still think Heat Evolution was overall worse, but Ignition is definitely up there. So, it's a problem when we fans have to go back to 2004, 21 years ago. Actually, 2003 technically when it came out. So 22 years ago to say when we had the last great NASCAR game. So when iRacing comes out with this stuff, and I'll ask Johnny later on what he thinks, because I know he has his opinions on NASCAR gaming as well. But, you know, you can even see here, we got this article from the Daily Downforce. The dev diary, you know, mentions a lot of things like how social media is going to be a factor in NASCAR 25, which, by the way, iRacing. Just throwing it out there. Wouldn't it be awesome if every driver in career mode, they win a race or something happens, and then you got me in the game saying, would you say that his move was above or below the cut line? NASCAR 25. You know what to do. Oh, looks like we got an issue. Okay, looked like we had an issue with the internet connection. Sorry about that, folks. But basically, you see here on this daily Downforce article, it talks about, time management aspects of the career mode, like off-track decisions, being in a movie or helping your team with inventory. And in my opinion, I think all this stuff is really important because, you want to feel like you're a driver, like you're a real-life athlete. And the reason I say this is because a lot of NASCAR games, especially, even going back to Heat 5, Heat 4, Heat 3, you name it. A lot of the career mode is basically same linear path in the sense of you're either a driver and you're trying to get contracts to a better ride, or you're a team owner who is struggling at the beginning and then becomes a championship contender at the end. Other than that, that's basically been NASCAR games for the longest time, a decade plus. So when I hear things like this, talking about off-track decisions, being in a movie, helping your team with inventory, this is like stuff you get in Madden, in NBA 2K, that really immerses you into the experience of being just, not even just a driver, but a professional athlete. Because, folks, let's be honest, these drivers, they're not just pulling up to the track on Sunday, leaving, doing whatever they want for a week, not even doing anything, and then back to the track. No, there is a lot more to being a professional athlete than meets the eye. Commercials, movies, sponsor obligations, you name it. So you really need to immerse yourself in that experience, and that does take time. What does that take out in terms of sim racing, sim experience, team meetings, everything. And I feel like this game, if what they say is true and it lives up to expectations, NASCAR 25 is going to deliver on that. And I really like how they're getting social media involved. Again, NBA does this, 2K does this. NASCAR Heat 2, I believe, or Heat 3 tried doing this, a couple years ago. It felt kind of generic, so I'm hoping this one takes it to that next level because, social media is a really big deal. NASCAR makes half of their decisions nowadays just by looking at Twitter. So it is really important to show how big of a deal social media is because, again, there's a lot of pressure on that. Driver image, sponsor image, you name it. So to have that platform, I think is a really big deal. And, the Dev Diary, of course, we didn't really get a lot of, in terms of footage, in terms of how the cars are going to look, race, the physics, you name it. That is the one thing. But, I'm pretty sure we'll get that maybe in Dev Diary 4, Dev Diary 5. We still got a couple months until the game is released, which I was thinking about maybe putting this in a below the cut line for a future episode, but we'll see. Maybe closer to NASCAR 25, we'll talk about that. But overall, from what we've seen from NASCAR 25, I love how immersive and in-depth so far it looks like this game is going to be. So I definitely put that above the cut line. But let's go back to Johnny real quick. So Johnny, I know how, we've talked about it before. I'm pretty sure you mentioned it on social media before where, you're very skeptical of NASCAR 25, especially after NASCAR 21 Ignition, which, I don't blame you. I think we all should. I'm someone who pre-ordered NASCAR 21, and that was one of the biggest wastes of money I think I've ever done. So, what say you? What do you think about what we've seen so far with NASCAR 25, especially with, the social media aspects, the off-track stuff, and why is it you're kind of in this I need to see it to believe it mindset?
I'll just answer the question because I know video game companies. I have friends, family even that work in that industry, and I know how that all works at this point. They just want your money. Now, some companies obviously do it the right way. They want your money because they take the time, and they're putting out a good product. But again, I know how some of these companies work. They just want your money, and they know how to finesse their way into making you think that something looks good when they know it's not good. But with all that being said, I like Heat 5, but I like it for what it is. It's a basic game. It's got solid mechanics. It's fun to play online multiplayer. Good to race in leagues. Heat 4, same thing. I like it for just the basic game that it is. Ignition was atrocious. The last good NASCAR game or great, was Thunder '04 to me. Thunder '03 is my favorite of all time. But I'll say this, Armani, every time that you see these trailers, you have to take it for you have to just take it all with a grain of salt. But based on what I'm seeing, they are putting the time into the things that I think the fans want to see, right? That extracurricular stuff, if you will, that gives some depth to the career mode. I love playing, well, obviously I love the career mode, but I love playing online multiplayer. I would really like some sort of a ranking or true stat keeping system in multiplayer where if you win races, you rank up and you get a better like name of some sort online. I think something like that would be good. I'd like to be able to have a little bit more control in the pits, something like that, feel more realistic. But again, what they're working on in career mode seems to me like they're actually taking what a lot of people have tweeted about and voiced frustrations about overall in the NASCAR gaming landscape, and it seems like they're building the game around that. But I'll say it again, and that this will be the last thing I say. You got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to be patient. There was a lot of people. I won't mention names, Armani, but that saw some of those Ignition trailers and oh, this is gonna be the greatest game. Oh, I can't wait. Da 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 da. And just a massive, massive flop in sports gaming, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I mean, I'm not going to pre-order NASCAR 25. I have iRacing, so I wish it was on PC, but thankfully I have an Xbox, so I don't really got to worry too much about that. But I do agree with you. I need to see it to believe it. Once I see some good reviews, then I'll find out, okay, do I want to spend money on this game or not? So, I got something else here that's above the cut line, and you kind of see here, what it's going to be. It's going to be the Xfinity Series race. I thought that this race here was phenomenal. Where do I have it on my race weekend rankings? Obviously when we get to that segment, I'll let you know. But, I mean, there was just so much action throughout. And it's kind of crazy because, let's take a look at one of these clips here. Take a look at one of these clips here. I mean, yeah, obviously this wreck was Sam Mayer, and, wasn't one of the best things about the race. But overall, I mean, just, I know people will see Austin Hill and they'll think, oh my God, Austin Hill, another win. I even saw on Twitter people were trying to discredit Austin Hill's win because it seemed like no one really tried to pass him. Folks, I'm sure they were trying to pass him. It just didn't work, obviously. Atlanta races very differently than Daytona or Talladega. It's a different style of Superspeedway racing, if you will. But overall, I think there was a lot of action throughout the race, and in my opinion, being like a racing purist, it was kind of cool really seeing just how good at this style of racing Austin Hill is. I mean, folks, in terms of Xfinity racing, he is, say what you want, but he is on that level of a Dale Sr., a Dale Jr., a Tony Stewart, in terms of being able to work his way through the field, manipulate the draft, stay up front, not allow anyone to get by him. Say what you want about RCR. Say, oh, well, Jesse Love was up there too. At the end of the day, who was the one that won? Who was the one that probably should have won last week at Daytona? It was Austin Hill. I always appreciate the craftsmanship of when a driver is good at a certain type of racing. And we'll get to what I think about what people say, what other people say about the talent-wise Superspeedway racing when we get to below the cut line. Spoiler alert. But, seeing what Austin Hill is able to do, 5 wins at this type of track at Atlanta. When are you ever going to see this again? So overall, I thought the Xfinity Series race was great. You had battles throughout the field. Again, could end the storyline. Could anyone get by Austin Cindric? Could anyone get it done? And they tried. Almirola tried. defending champion Justin Allgaier tried. Even his teammate Jesse Love tried. And no one could get it done over Austin Hill. That should tell you how good of a driver he is at these super speedways. Again, whatever you think about super speedway racing, that's your opinion. I see it nowadays as a different form of racing, like short track, road course, mile and a half, dirt, you name it. But that's up to you. So, let's bring back Johnny in here. So, Johnny, what do you think about the Xfinity Series races as a whole, and more specifically, Austin Hill? How this man's been able to dominate this type of racing, how this man has really been able to just be in a league of his own, and 5 wins at this style, at this Atlanta. In my opinion, that's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the frustrations in the Cup Series is that the same X drivers, let's say, your Logano's, your Cindric's, your Blaney's, your Hamlin's, even still Byron's, right? Like, those guys always seem to be up front, but even Keselowski's another name I should mention, right? But it seems a lot of times, right, that the best car, those best drivers, they don't win, right? Because they find themselves in some stupid wreck. Whereas I find now the Xfinity Series, the best driver in the best car in terms of super speedways is getting it done 90 to 95% of the time at this point, right? And even at Daytona, who wins? His teammate Jesse Love, right? That program at RCR is spectacular. They always bring good cars. They've got the right guys to win those sort of races. The question for me around Austin Hill is, are you Ricky Stenhouse Jr. or are you, a more complete guy? Right? Because, yeah, we've seen Austin Hill win some other places, but the majority of his work in the Xfinity Series has come at super speedways. So if he wants to, get that next jump right to the Cup Series, I would continue to ask, what are you as a race car driver? Are you just a one-trick pony? Or, can you find yourself winning at different types of tracks? But for what it's worth, Austin Hill right now is in superstar category in terms of super speedway racing. I would say overall, like from Cup down to trucks and everything in between. Yes, I would say that. I would say that. He is absolutely. The guy wins. But, he's in the Xfinity Series, and if he ever makes that jump, I don't believe in him that he can win much in the Cup Series overall.
So let me ask you a question.
Please.
If Austin Hill were to make it a Cup, would you put him... So, like we always say, SVG, he's guaranteed to win a road course race. Or AJ Allmendinger is guaranteed to win a road course race. Would you put Austin Hill on that same level, but on super speedways?
Again, I mean, it's tough because I just went... The first thing I said to you was, the difference between the Xfinity and Cup Series right now is these best guys, they're really only winning 50 to, I would say, 65% of the time, the best driver in the best car winning. I would put him in the category of he's going to be up there just about every race, right? Like, look how quick Cindric elevated from going right to the Cup Series, and from day one when he was a rookie, every single time at a super speedway, Austin Cindric is somewhere in that top 5 category throughout the majority of the race. That's where I would say, like, top 7, the majority of the race, I would put Austin Hill in. I really would. The minute he makes that jump. But I just, again, like, so much has to go your way, right, in the Cup Series because of just how I feel like how it works right now. So I don't, to me, he'll be a guy, if he ever gets the Cup Series, he'll win like one super speedway every 3 years, right? That's kind of where I'm at with Austin Hill.
All right. Now, going into super speedways, we've talked about what's above the cut line. And I know our good buddy NASCAR Opinion, he's in the chat. And shout out to Will on this. Shout out to Will on this part because he did the homework for me and he watched the entire Actions Detrimental show this week and basically had a bunch of quotes about Denny Hamlin and what Denny Hamlin had to say. Now, this is important because number one, I don't need to go through the entire Actions Detrimental show. You can see it right here. But it's important because this is where we're going to start going in terms of below the cut line, and I'll talk about it in just a moment. I think this one is kind of a good one, where Denny says, it's luck, you just have to avoid the wrecks. Denny, here's why I think this is below the cut line. I'm going to talk about just Superspeedway racing as a whole. My thoughts on Superspeedway racing. To me, here's the thing. Is this package perfect? No. Is this one of the great... Is there things that needs to be worked on with the next-gen car Superspeedways? I mean, we're at Atlanta, so Atlanta would tell you no, but overall, I would say yes. However, Denny, I just want to say this right now. If Cole Custer doesn't make that move on the final lap and wrecks himself, Denny, and Austin Cindric, we're not having this conversation. This conversation might exist, but would be nowhere close to the level it has gotten over the past week. What the conversation would have been about is, okay, that was probably, whatever your opinion was on the race. Good, solid, you name it. Whoever out of those three won the race, that was that. But then these three wreck, and all of a sudden, it gets blown to... This is terrible. This is the worst thing we've ever seen. This is why NASCAR is dying. Folks, let me ask you a question. I'll even go into the comment banks here. Let me know what your thought on this statement is. But why is it when Joey Logano and Ricky Stenhouse get together, we blame the drivers? We don't blame the sport, the package, everything, you name it. But when Austin Cindric, Denny Hamlin, and Cole Custer, and especially Custer making that move, when that happens, that transitions to it's NASCAR's fault. But when Stenhouse and Logano do something arguably worse, because I believe that took out more cars, that's not on NASCAR. Like, we got to pick and choose our battles here. If we said there was a problem with the package from the get-go when that wreck happened with Logano and Stenhouse, okay, I'd probably still disagree on most parts. I'd still say that's more on the drivers, because we saw even Joey. He had power issues or a battery issue, went a lap down, and was still in contention for the win at the end. We even saw after the rain delay, drivers can make moves even 3 wide if they wanted to. When these drivers want to go, they can go. And another thing that kind of bugs me the wrong way is when we try to act like if this was the 2021 the final years of the Gen 6 car, where we would make it seem like, oh, if they had this car again, they would be 3 wide, the racing would be phenomenal for lap after lap after lap. Is that package better? In my opinion, yes. But are we not going to act like during the 2021 Daytona 500, they were single file for like 150 out of the 200 laps? And we were all complaining that they're single file because they were probably saving fuel. They want to take care of their equipment. Folks, that's what Superspeedway racing mostly is. No one's going to make a daring move 9 times out, 7, 8 times out of 10 on lap 50 out of 200 at a plate track. And if we want to act like wrecks are something new with the next gen, which first of all is just completely inaccurate. I mean, the 2018 Daytona 500 was a complete disaster because it was a wreck fest. Elliott, Keselowski, Danica, all these drivers, Almirola and Austin Dillon. The whole race was a wreck. This had been going on for years. And even if you want to go and say, oh, the Gen 4 car required more skill, which I'm not disagreeing, you also got to take into account that in the Gen 4 era, Daytona and Talladega, they were worn completely down. Similar to what Atlanta is nowadays. That's why Atlanta, in my opinion, is the best super speedway on the schedule. It said in the title, is it? In my opinion, it is. And that's because the track is so worn down. You see handling becoming a factor. You see the talent on display. And that's why, in my opinion, the racing is so good. Talladega, Daytona, it's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. You're still more at the mercy of your car and the package. And you still need a couple more years before we get back to that level at Daytona, Talladega. Atlanta, I think it's already there. And that's why I think it's the best play track on the schedule. But again, if Cole Custer doesn't come down on Denny Hamlin and Austin Cindric, this conversation doesn't exist. Or maybe it does, but not to this level. And I'm going to look at the comments again here real quick. So let me ask you this question again. Why are we not putting essentially what Cole Custer did on the same level of Logano and Stenhouse? We blame those two because they're not popular. And I stand by what I said. They're two of the dumbest plate racers in the field. Even though they're two of the best, they're also two of the dumbest because they make the dumb moves. But when Custer does it, we blame NASCAR. It's like the fans who are going out getting mad at NASCAR because Parker Kligerman got DQ'd. His car was illegal. Why are you mad at NASCAR? If that was Corey Heim who got DQ'd and Parker Kligerman got the win, y'all would be clowning the 11 team. But y'all are mad at NASCAR for enforcing its DQ policy. Let's go into the comments real quick here. This guy thinks Larson is so good. Well, yeah, you see, he's the greatest driver of all time. In all seriousness. JGR for life, shout out to you, my man. I was blaming the drivers every time a wreck happened. I agree. I blame Custer more than NASCAR in that point. The only thing I blame NASCAR on is having overtime. I agree. I'm probably one of the only fans out there who thinks overtime shouldn't exist. If the race ends under yellow, boo-hoo. It's a 500-mile race, not a 512-mile long race. Will, again, shout out to you. You did the homework for me. The package overall is bad. Also, drivers can still make bad decisions no matter the package. Okay, but my point is, so why are we not blaming Custer? Why are we blaming NASCAR? But we don't blame NASCAR for Logano and Stenhouse. Makes no sense. Not saying the package is great. Again, there's a lot that needs to be worked on, but pick a side. You can't bounce from one side to another when it fits your narrative. That's what I'm trying to say. Going 0-49 is crazy. How did your driver do? All right, let's bring Johnny back in here because I can rant on this for a long time, but I want to get Johnny's opinion on this. Johnny, again, shout out to our boy Will for doing the hard work for me. But what do you think just about overall, first of all, what do you think about what I said about Atlanta being the best super speedway on the schedule?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Clearly, you can see that the Superspeedway package works the best at Atlanta. You can truly, and honestly, I think another thing that helps Atlanta is the way they, that first stage being just a green flag run, right? Like you don't have to worry about fuel saving and all that jazz. The way you can take a run, pass on the bottom, slide up past somebody. There's different ways to get to the front. You can truly be aggressive. By far right now, it's the best super speedway on the schedule. My favorite track super speedway is Talladega, just because I feel like the way where the position of the start finish line, it just makes for that final whatever X amount of feet. Truly just it's the best, right? It's just the best. But I think product wise, Atlanta with this package it just works. To answer or to go back to your Denny point, I would actually argue against you and say that the reason you can blame NASCAR is because NASCAR makes the rules that say if you win, you are in the playoffs. And what it means at this point to be in the playoffs from a team like Cole Custer's team or a team like Hayek now Motorsports and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. or a team I don't know, pick one of the smaller teams, the Wood Brothers, if you will, financially, when they are in the owners' playoffs and competing for a championship, financially, that goes such a long way. So it is now, in my opinion, bred into these drivers and these teams, the spotter, the crew chief, go get me one. Go get it. Go get it done. Don't care what it takes. Win at all costs, right? So, you know, where do you put the blame on? For you, it's, well, if Cole Custer doesn't make that move, Denny keeps his mouth shut, or we can compare those moves apples to apples. One was on the last lap, one was whatever, 17 laps to go, whatever it was. Still two stupid moves, if you will, but we're just talking about the Custer one because one driver, opens his mouth about it. But I would say, again, all of it comes down to NASCAR creating a rule that financially supports a lot of these small teams and teams in general and drivers and the paychecks all these guys get to say, hey, if you win a race, you could suck for the whole season, i.e. Harrison Burton. But that money that they got because Harrison Burton, now all credit to him, he did it the clean way to win that race. But, a lot of these guys, you win, you're in the playoffs, you're getting a hefty paycheck, your team's going to like you a lot more. That's just how it works now. And that all stems from NASCAR's playoff and championship.
Oh, that's weird. What happened to Johnny? Okay, something happened with Johnny. We lost him, but I'll be right back. All right. Well,
I'm back.
Yep.
Hey, is Will in the chat? Hey, Will. This cheapskate Armani doesn't even pay for Zoom. We got free
I
Zoom.
did. That's what's crazy is that I did. I literally did. So I don't know why that happened.
Hey, it happens. It's all good. But yeah, you know how I feel about that. I think it stems from NASCAR and their championship, procedure, protocol, how they, do that. I think that's the issue.
Yep. That is interesting. I haven't heard that argument yet. All the arguments I've heard have been about the plate racing or how NASCAR just wants entertainment, you and that. But when you mention the playoffs, it does make a lot more sense. Yeah, you can still blame the driver, but NASCAR puts them in that position because of the playoffs that there's so much on the line that you have to take that risk.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, like back in the 2000s, it was points over, but right, like points meant more for your championship standing than a win. Now it's completely different. Completely different.
All right. Well, let's move on to our final below the cut line before we get into the race weekend rankings. And that is the Chase Briscoe news. 4-race suspension, massive Daytona 500 penalty because of the spoiler modification. Now, JGR did say they are going to appeal this, so we'll see if this, really sticks. But this is insane. 2 out of the last 3 years for Chase Briscoe, his team has been hit with a 100+ point penalty. That is insane. I feel bad for Briscoe at that point. And, it's crazy because I really do think this does show that James Small is on the hot seat at JGR. In my opinion, he should have been fired last year. When you go winless 2 out of 3 years with a Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame, it's a long day. It's a long day. But with the Hall of Fame level driver, oh, Johnny's going to say something about that. But with the Hall of Fame driver, you go winless 2 out of 3 years. And here's what I think is even a bigger indictment on James Small. It shows me that he hasn't figured out this next gen car. He did win 3 races in 2023. He did win the regular season championship. But once they got to the playoffs, they fell off a cliff. He should have been out round 1 and just skated by the round of 8 and was nowhere close to making the Final 4. Winless in 2022. Say what you want about being top 5 in points, but he still missed the playoffs, couldn't win a race. Obviously, we know last year, out of the round of 16, complete disaster of a final year for Truex. Up to his standards. And already, early on here in the season, a 100-point penalty. Winning the pole when everyone kind of thought something was up with that 19 car. And it turned out to be true. Again, they did say that they were going to appeal the penalty. So we'll see, whether they get that or not. If history tells us anything, they won't get the penalty rescinded. It'll probably stick. But now, after one race, well, I don't know where they're at now after Atlanta. We'll see later on when the official standings are out. But at least after one race, they were down negative 67 points. You watching, and everyone out there has more points than Chase Briscoe in the Cup Series. That is a big problem. And again, in my opinion, I think James Small is on the hot seat. He probably should have been fired again last year. He probably should have been fired after the playoff collapse in 2023. That is James Small's legacy in the next gen era. And why do I bring up the next gen era? Because that's where we are right now. I don't care what you did in the Gen 6. That is an old car that is obsolete. I care about what you do here with the next gen car. And what have you done in the next gen? 2 winless years, a playoff collapse, and a round of 16 exit. And missing the playoffs in 2022. And already adding on a massive penalty. Probably should have changed crew chiefs. If there was anyone that needed to do crew chief, it was not Denny. In my opinion, it was not Ty Gibbs. It's the 19 team. They need a new leader. I don't know what James Small has on Joe Gibbs. To me, I'm an Indianapolis Colts fan. I think Chris Ballard, our GM, should have been fired years ago. It feels something very similar to that of why is he still here? So, we'll bring back Johnny right now. And, Johnny, what do you think about, just the penalty and the pressure that the 19 team is on?
Yeah, oof, that's brutal. At least it's like race 2, I guess. End of race 1 going into race 2. That's kind of the only like positive note is you got plenty of season left. All it takes is for a Joe Gibbs racing car to get one win to get into the playoffs, right? Like that's all it takes. I think Briscoe is more than capable of being able to do that. So in that sense, there's a lot of racing left. There's a lot of season left. I think it's his first year. I feel like they're just, he's expected to make the playoffs and get to the round of 12. I think that's their expectations right now for Chase Briscoe in year 1. I think this is obviously a long play to keep this young kind of guy that can do it at short tracks, can do it at road course stuff. Pretty good at some of these mile and a halves. Obviously, one Darlington, one Phoenix. So pretty good on dirt. Kind of can do it all. Jack of all trades, if you will. So definitely the long play. I'm not too concerned. I think how do I say this? If this was Hamlin, this would have, really broken the internet. Not that it didn't, but Hamlin gets a new crew chief, loses Gabe Hart, first race, they're down 100 points. That would have been huge. It's Chase Briscoe. He's right now the third guy. You could maybe even argue he's the 4th guy because the 3rd guy you could make an argument is the grandson of the team owner. But it's still Bell number 1, Hamlin number 2. I would say Briscoe 3 and Gibbs 4, just talent wise, but I don't know. It's Chase Briscoe. He needs to make a name for himself for this to really resonate a little bit more. Guy has 2 career wins in, I don't know, 5 years in the Cup Series. I think he's gonna good opportunity, talented race car driver. But I don't know. That's how I look at this.
That's fair. I mean, he's been in SHR, which hasn't really been great for most of his career, but I see what you're saying. So, that's above and below the cut line. Now, let's move on to race weekend rankings. Now, I did mention it before, how we're going to do things a little bit different here. This part is going to be the same, which that should imply anything. There is going to be a part 2 now to race weekend rankings, but we'll get to that later on. We got 3 races to rank here today, so we just got the podium this week. We got the Xfinity, the truck, and the Cup race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into it, and let's start off with, I think is the 3rd race, the bottom step of the podium, and I'm going to give it controversial maybe to some people. I'll give my explanation. I'm going to say the truck race. I'm going to put that at last place. And I thought the race as a whole was, it was okay. It wasn't a bad race, but it was definitely carried by its stage and race finish. You know, I thought the stage 1 finish was great. I thought the finish at the end was great. You know, Kyle Busch doing his thing. But overall, I thought the racing was kind of You know, a lot of single file, a few moves made here and there, but overall, if I had to rank it, I'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10. If you want to add a few more points because of the finishes, maybe put it to a 7, but 6, 6.5, that's where I'm putting the truck race at Atlanta. Meanwhile, the Xfinity Series race, maybe a lot of people would have it at the bottom. In my opinion, I do have it at number 2. I did think about putting it number 1, but obviously process of elimination, I have something else at number 1. And I thought the racing was just more consistently better. More consistent battles. Yeah, Austin Hill dominated from start to finish. But again, seeing the craftsmanship of a guy being so good at a certain style of racing. Seeing how desperate everyone was to get to him. Making daring moves. Yeah, the caution at the end, kind of at the end of the race, really dulled it. But I thought the racing was more consistent 2-3 wide action. You know, there were points where you thought maybe Austin Hill doesn't have this in the bag, and then he proved us all wrong. So I'm going to slightly put the Xfinity Series race. Oh, by the way, the first 6 laps already, in my opinion, I knew. Yeah, it's probably going to go at least number 2. I'd probably give it a 7 to a 7.5 out of 10, like maybe half a point to a point over the truck race. And obviously, number 1, you got to give it to the Cup race. I can't sing Atlanta's praises without putting Cup number 1. Again, it's old school Daytona and Talladega in the Gen 4 era. How can you... I mean, multiple lead changes. Handling mattered. Like Johnny said, you could get a run and get on a guy and do everything that way and slingshot. It was phenomenal. Atlanta, in my opinion, is the best super speedway on the schedule. So I'd give that race, if we got just that 3 wide green flag finish, we were looking at a 9 to a 9.5 out of 10. We were so close to greatness. But NASCAR, being NASCAR, inconsistent, I'd still give it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a great race overall. And yeah, that is this week's edition of Race Weekend Rankings. Now, if you guys want to give your Race Weekend Rankings, go down into the description. There is the link for this tier maker for this week's edition for Atlanta for Race Weekend Rankings. And if you notice it, there is a second link. And we're going to get to that right now. So, as you can see here, one new thing that we're going to do to Race Weekend Rankings, and we are going to do this for the entire season. We are going to try to rank every single race from S tier, meaning all-timer, to F, bottom tier. Never want to see that again. And again, you can follow me along with the link in the description. So go there and even share it on social media. Share it on Twitter. Tag Daily Downforce. Tag me at Armani DePaul. Your race weekend rankings. So, let's get started on this, and we're going to include the Daytona races as well. So, start off here with the Al Dente 200. I believe this was the ARCA race. I'm going to put this in D tier. Went back and looked at highlights. I'm pretty sure I had this last week, and I stand by that. Wasn't a great race. It was just Rex. It's ARCA. It's Daytona. Let's move on. The Cup race in Atlanta. I did put it number 1, but where would I put it as a whole? You know, I'm going to put it A tier. I wouldn't say it's necessarily S tier. Again, I think the caution at the end really hurt this race. But overall, I thought it was a very good race. Brought that old school feel. Everything that I said before in Atlanta's race weekend rankings, you can apply it here. I'm going to put that in A tier. And I do think it was better than the Daytona 500, which I would probably put overall in B tier. A solid Daytona 500 for the next gen era. Maybe you'd want to put it C tier. I wouldn't completely blame you, but again, I'm a little more optimistic, so I'd probably put it B tier. I do think Atlanta was better in every way, shape, or form, though. Maybe besides the finish. The truck race. I'll give it C tier. Truck race at Atlanta, I'll give it C tier. You know, wasn't the greatest truck race in the world. I think it was kind of meh, but still a solid enough race. Nothing, I'm probably not going to remember this race even 2 weeks from now, but a solid enough race. Deserves to be in the middle. C tier. This one, I believe this was the truck race at Daytona. This one is a little bit different because I was there. So it's always going to be hard for me to rank races when I'm attending in person as opposed to watching on TV because I can't, I can't get all the storylines. I'd probably put this one in C tier. Do I want to put it over? I'm going to leave it behind the Atlanta race because I do think the Parker Kligerman DQ does leave a sour taste in the mouth. Just a DQ in general, I think would, even if it was Corey Haim or Michael McDowell, whoever, Kligerman does sting, it does hurt it a little bit, but I'll still put it in C tier. The Xfinity race at Daytona. I thought it was a good race overall, but I'm going to put it C tier as well, just above the truck race. I did have it above the truck race in Daytona, so has it changed week for week? But overall, RCR dominated. It was who won the truck race then? Little projects. It was Corey Haim. If you're trying to say Parker Kligerman was a real winner, please stop. I'm kidding. But overall, I thought it was a solid race. I thought it was better than trucks. I don't think it was on the same level with Daytona, so I put it C tier. And finally, the Xfinity race at Atlanta. Maybe controversial. Do I want to put it top of C tier? I'm going to put it B tier. Just behind the Daytona 500. Again, I thought the 500 was better than most. I thought the Xfinity race was better than most. But I do think that the Xfinity race at Atlanta was just behind the Daytona 500. So, for our first edition of the 2025 season of Race Weekend Rankings, this is what we got. I'm proud of the list. I think overall, maybe you could put Atlanta down to B tier, maybe move some things here and there across B or C. But overall, I think majority of people would say that was a B tier race, that was a C tier race, that's a D, you name it. So again, let me know your race weekend rankings. Tag us on Daily Downforce and myself at Armani DePaul. Go into the description and show us your race weekend rankings. But let's bring it over to Johnny. Johnny, what did you think of my edition of Race Weekend Rankings? Again, I had Cup number 1 for Atlanta, Xfinity 2, Truck 3. What were your thoughts?
You can't put the Cup race number 1. You can't
What?
do that finish, dude. It killed it. It killed it.
How?
Because they were about to race 3 wide again for the second year road to the start-finish line. That's why. The truck race, I think you completely underestimated. If you watch the last 25 laps of that Cup race, which I did from a casino, and it was awesome. It was Kyle effing Busch just, doing his thing against a truck field of young guys. He was just eating those guys apart. And if you heard him in the post-race interview, he literally said a lot of those guys should go back and rewatch that race to show, to learn what I just did out there. And Friesen, right? It was Kyle Busch, one of the greatest of all time, against, a veteran of the truck series, Stuart Friesen, who I think was looking for either his fourth, fifth, something like that, career truck series race. And he the veteran, almost beat out one of the GOATs, but he didn't. And that was a clean green flag finish. No wrecks in the back of the field with a bunch of young kids that barely have their driver's license. They made it green in these Cup Series fools out there like Stenhouse and whoever else is in the back wrecking the field. They can't stay green. And to me, you have a product that is on pace for A+, and then you throw the caution waiting for a 3-wide finish because some, 19th place guy is trying to get 16th place. Like, for what? So I just think the finish ruins that whole race, for me at least. Still great, still a lot of passing. I would put it 2. I'll put the Xfinity race 3. It was a good race. I think they all were good, good races. I would go 3 Xfinity, 2 Cup for that just finish, and then number 1, yeah, I put the truck race. That was an awesome truck race. It really was.
I get what you're saying. Again, I think the Cup race is more consistently at better racing than truck, and that was my thinking about it. It was just a consistent better race than trucks, but I get what you're saying. Yeah, definitely. We were so close to an S tier race for Cup, and that's why I couldn't break. It was so close.
Yeah, so I mean, basically you are putting the 90% outweighing so I'm taking the final 10% of that truck race and putting it on top. You're taking the first 90% of that Cup race and putting it on top.
Yes.
Again, I see where you're coming from. I just am so pissed off from how the way that.
I'm a Larson fan. How do you think I feels like my driver's finally going to win a plate race, and then we get that? Even if Hocevar made that stick.
No, I know. We didn't even get to see it. They threw a caution. Maybe he did. Come on.
Well, anyways, that's the race weekend rankings. Again, everybody, let me know your race weekend rankings. Link in the description. Tag us. And before we go, I want y'all to do one more thing for me before we go off air. I want to give a massive shout out to my man over here, Johnny on the track, for coming on for this episode. And Johnny, I want you just to talk about, just what you do as a whole, the NASCAR betting, everything. Obviously, we saw each other at the Daytona 10. So just explain, what you do, everything, why you do this. And while you do that, everyone, you see underneath Johnny right here, go to his YouTube, Johnny on the Track. Go to his Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at JOTT_podcast, and give this man a follow. Phenomenal content over there. Phenomenal on Twitter as well. Jotlanta. I don't know if I'd call that phenomenal, but it's something. So, Johnny, talk about what you do, why you love it, and everyone go follow Johnny.
Well, thank you, Armani. Appreciate you having me on. Great show. I really like the show. I'll be on. I would be honest with you. You know that about me.
Yeah, I know. Trust me,
stuff.
I know.
Yeah, so great stuff. Glad to be on. Thanks, chat. Right now, chat. What do you think of? How did I perform on tonight's episode? Let me know, chat.
Would you say Johnny was above the cut line or below the cut line this week?
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, come on, chat. Fire off. Let's go. So Johnny on the Track on YouTube every Tuesday night. We do a betting show previewing. I just do Cup Series bets. Above the cut line. Let's go.
JGR, are you saying that because Bell won? Or are you being serious? No, I'm just kidding. I'm playing with you.
Let's go. Yeah, so Tuesday nights we got the betting show. Yeah, I would say 95% of the time it's just Cup Series bets, unless I feel pretty confident about giving you guys something on Xfinity or trucks. So do that. I put all my betting cards on at JOTT_podcast, as well as Action Network. That's just Johnny on the track. Yeah, Armani, I do it because, I love NASCAR. I started my channel as a podcast, channel where basically I would have somebody from the industry, whether it be a driver, crew chief, spotter. We had your boy Tyler Mon Larson spotter on a few times. Great guy. So that's how it started. And, I had always kind of done NASCAR betting and done DraftKings stuff. And was pretty good at it, honestly. And so I thought to myself, hey, why not try that as well? That's not to say we don't do other content like fun stuff like this. We do. I've got some cool interviews coming pretty soon. There's a NASCAR driver for MBM Motorsports from Rhode Island, where I'm from. Okay. So he's going to be in the Xfinity Series. We're going to have him on the channel. So hoping to do more interviews as well. But yeah, if you are new to betting, definitely, you don't have to bet a lot, but it does, make the race interesting. And even if you have like a favorite driver, why not throw $5 on him every now and then when you might feel confident about him. So it's fun. It always gives you another reason to watch the race. But it also pisses you off when you have Hendrick Motorsports to win and Kyle Larson has a run on the final lap, and someone throws a caution, and JGR for life is happy and Johnny on the track is not. So that sucks sometimes. But I would say, yeah, definitely check us out and give us some feedback.
Absolutely, Johnny. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, everybody, go check out Johnny on the track and JOTT_podcast. And everyone, that's going to do it for another episode of the Cutline. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, let me know your race weekend rankings for this week. We will be back next week with Circuit of the Americas. If you guys want to follow me personally, you got my Instagram and my TikTok. Those are the two I am most active on underneath my webcam as well. Follow us on Daily Downforce, of course, on all social media platforms. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to wave the checkered flag for this episode, and this was The Cutline.